Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Are you someone on the spectrum who's been binge eating because you've been through a toxic relationship or don't know why you're binge eating and you need help? Well, my next guest will help you with that issue. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage and let's learn more about her.
I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking about.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Today I'm joined with Jillian Scott. Welcome to the show, Jillian.
Hi, thank you so much.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jillian. I'm a certified trauma-informed life and health coach. I work with people specifically around their relationship with food, binge eating, emotional eating. And what I found is that a lot of my clients have also been through traumatic and toxic relationships. They've grown up in homes where they felt very misunderstood, unaccepted, unloved. There were different patterns of verbal and emotional abuse, not always physical. And so it is becoming more aware of, I think, as a society and a culture, we're starting to become more aware of the different types of abuse that happen and
Mhm.
how to understand the patterns. Because we bring those into our adult relationships. We bring them into patterns with food and body. We use food as a coping mechanism. We can use alcohol as a coping mechanism. And
Mhm.
so that's what I help people do is really understand the cycles and the patterns, how they're playing out so that you can break them.
I mean, that is so true, is because when you think about it, when you deal with a trauma at a young age, you don't
Mhm.
realize you're taking the trauma with you into your older age. And
Right.
you don't realize it's still there until something triggers it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
So how does trauma fall into the place of someone going to find their favorite comfort food and just start eating it and not realize they're binge eating or
yeah.
emotional eating?
Great question. So I define emotional eating as we are eating, we're not physically hungry, number one. And number two, we are eating most often to avoid negative emotions. And so our brains are really smart. They are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain via the path of least resistance. So these habit brains, like they're high tuned to seek out what's fast, easy, quick, reliable, and familiar. And that's how it wants to operate. That's how it wants to self soothe. And so, anytime we're faced with a negative emotion, whether it's something we've faced in the past before or not, our brain is often wanting to go to, well, food, because it creates this rapid, reliable, effective sense of relief. And so, because it's afraid of physical pain, our brains don't like emotional pain. It doesn't like mental pain, the psychological pain. Anytime we have a trigger that reminds us of something that we went through as a kid when we felt embarrassed, when we felt unloved, when we felt rejected, when we felt abandoned, our brains are very much in tune and aligned to avoid that emotion. It wants to protect you from that because it sees it as danger. And so what I do with people is really help them to identify what is it that they're feeling. So we have to understand what is the pattern and how is that playing out in their current life. So what's the emotion that they keep trying to avoid? And so it could be you have a really stressful week, and at the end of the week you're exhausted, you're tired, you're stressed. So we could be reaching for maybe a large pizza, a bag of chips. But then on top of it, it might also be feeling like I didn't get enough done. I'm not doing enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not proving that I'm not allowed to take a break. I should be doing more. I should be further along in my life. So there can be these undercurrents of belief and patterns of belief that also play into us reaching for food. And so we have to start to identify like what and then slow down what's happening. So we want to identify what's happening before. What is the trigger? So is it words somebody said to you? Is it a certain time of day, a certain day of the week? What are the patterns? We need to look for the patterns, and then we can start to see the emotions. And oftentimes that's where we have to get really honest with ourselves about what am I really feeling. It takes a lot of vulnerability to do this type of work.
So you'd say stress would be one of the biggest things I'm guessing because
Hmm.
everyone deals with stress.
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
you would so in retrospect, binge eating, emotional eating, it's all kind of tied into stress. They're related one way or
Yeah.
another.
Yes, right. Right. Yeah. So stress is a very common one, especially because we live in such a high stress culture. We're
Mhm.
very busy. We're on the go. We're double booked. We're always fighting traffic. Where not only are we overscheduled, our kids are overscheduled, and so we often are taught from a young age that certain emotions are not allowed. We shouldn't be feeling a certain way. And so rather than taking a step back and looking at it, we look at, well, what does society say that I should be doing? How should I be responding? What's allowed here? So stress is a very common one. Rejection is a very common one. Feeling rejected, unwanted, undesirable from like coworkers or colleagues. When you get rejected for maybe a college you want to go to, a job you want to have. You might feel rejected from a peer group. You might feel rejected from family members, and from a very, whether it's a young age or as you get older, as you become an adult and you start to develop your own thoughts and beliefs, your religious views, political views, how you live your life, the values that you have might shift and be different from what your family of origin is. And we can feel some deep senses of rejection, and it really plays, and it tugs at that core foundation of safety, right? Because we are very communal people. It's humans. We were designed to live in community to on some extent. And when we no longer have that sense of safety in the community, it can feel very,
Mhm.
it can really wreck our nervous system. Yeah.
Now, I mean, you hit on something really important there. A lot of people don't realize rejection is so embedded deep within us, the fear of rejection, that it can, what it brings up. You
Hmm.
see a lot of people, especially those who are autistic, those who have
Hmm.
ADHD, those because of the fact that relationships mean so much
Hmm.
that people don't look at it as a relationship is only one part of the aspect of our lives. We don't need them, but they're
Hmm.
there. But we put so much on top of it that the fear of rejection just builds.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's logically, we know, like, I know I am not everybody's cup of tea. I know not everybody is going to like me. And yet I still want people to like me. I want them to think highly of me. I want them to understand where I'm coming from. I don't want to feel misunderstood. There are, we're kind of competing with these different parts of our brain. Part of my brain understands logically, I don't need this person as a friend. And yet, from a core, like, primal level, I want people to like me. I want to be accepted. I want to fit in.
Yeah.
And it's, kind of based off of different experiences in our past, how we grew up, and different memories that get stored. And sometimes they can be some traumatic memories, and really trauma, the way I see trauma is it's in the eye of the beholder.
Mhm.
So my perspective is it's not just what happens to you, it's what you make it mean. And that is where we find all of the power, because now we can rewrite the stories and we can see how different events and circumstances maybe impacted us as kids and teens and young adults, because we were telling a certain story about what was happening. And that's where we now can decide to rewrite that story as adults. But we have to also face like what it was that was coming up. What were we telling ourselves? What was that emotion that we are now trying to stuff down with food?
Now, is there a difference between binge eating and emotional eating? Or are they
So
almost
I see it kind of on a spectrum. So there's slight
okay?
difference. So I see it as like you've got overeating, then you have emotional eating, and then you have binge eating. And so binge eating is still emotional eating, but binge eating is often a large amount of food in a short amount of time, and it's done with a lot of shame and regret. So you feel a lot of like you want to isolate. Often we're doing that, we're kind of hiding when we do this. We want to do it in secret. We don't want anybody to find out about it. And there's a lot of shame and self-loathing afterwards. So that's kind of how I differentiate the two. Somebody might see, and this is where it's a little subjective. Somebody might overeat, and let's say they eat 3 donuts. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe they were emotionally eating there because they had multiple donuts and they weren't hungry. They might see it as a binge. So it's really, encourage people to use the words that best describe what you're going through, and in an empowering way. I've had several clients where they've noticed, okay, I overate, but I didn't binge. So
Mm,
it's noticing I could have kept eating, I could have kept going, and I stopped myself and
mhm.
recognizing like that is progress. So I think there is a difference, and we do want to start to differentiate what that difference is, but it will also be a little different person to person and what their experience is. So when I was binge eating, for example, I would eat like 3 protein bars, ice cream, chocolate, nuts, jerky, popcorn, all on the same night, like within maybe 2 hours. Like it was a large amount of food within a short amount of time. And then so much shame and regret. And I was doing it in secret, and I would do it where like my housemates wouldn't see, and I would hide the wrappers in the garbage can, or I would throw it away outside of the house so nobody could see the evidence, things like that. And so to me, it's like that's a binge. When I eat an extra like 3 pieces of chocolate at night and I'm not really hungry, that's maybe I'm emotionally eating. It's not a large amount of food like that. So that's kind of how I differentiate the two.
Now, when you have somebody, and how do you identify with them if they're binge eating or not? What do you tell them, what signs they should look back at and figure out what if they are binge eating or if they're overeating? What do you tell them to look for?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, great question. So we start with the first question of, am I hungry? So when
Mhm.
I'm teaching people, and we're looking at it from an emotional eating or a weight loss standpoint, I'm teaching them how to listen to their bodies and start to recognize, am I physically hungry? Or do I have mouth hunger and I just want to chew on something? Or is it that I'm emotionally hungry for something? So it's, am I really hungry? Have I had enough? And so that first question of, am I truly hungry, is a great starting point to determine, am I emotionally eating? Because if I walk into the kitchen, and there would be numerous times, especially when I was doing more of my work about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was really working on my own emotional eating and binge eating habit, I'd walk into the kitchen or I'd open the pantry, and then I would pause and I would ask myself, am I hungry? And
Mhm.
a lot of times the answer was no. And so I was like, okay, I need to leave the kitchen. I didn't have to evaluate, I didn't have to figure out why. In that moment, the first step was I walk out of the kitchen, I close the pantry door. There are going to be times where like that's the first step and starting to recognize it in the moment. And then most of the time, what happens is we'll notice it afterwards. So I'll notice it the next day. I'll think back on the night before and I'll realize, oh, yeah, I think I was emotionally eating there. Or, oh, I think there was some overeating happening. So then I walk clients through. I have different worksheets and guides that I give them. But even in a one on one coaching call or in a small group call, we'll walk through and look at what was happening around them, why, like what led up, what were the circumstances leading up to them going to get the food. Let's say they were going to get ice cream. Then I'll ask, like, okay, so what prompted you to get the ice cream? What made you think of ice cream? What were you telling yourself in the moment? And we want to find those excuses and justifications and permission giving thoughts.
Mhm.
So it might be as simple as maybe somebody in the house was eating ice cream and you saw it on the counter and you were like, "Ooh, that sounds good." Right? It's very subtle, it's very small. Or it might be that you're in the habit of eating the ice cream, or it might be, I'm feeling really bored or frustrated, and then it's like, oh yeah, I have ice cream, or I have cookies, or kind of whatever it might be. So it's starting to break down and understand the process of how we get to like walk ourselves through eating, and then it's what allows you to take the first bite. Then you get a few bites in. What allows you to keep eating? You like, when do you start to wake up and recognize this? And then afterwards is when we're often doing the evaluation of, okay, this was an overeat, this was more of a binge, this was emotional eating. And most clients are recognizing, like, I know I'm binging, I know I'm emotionally eating. They already have this sense and this awareness of like, I keep eating and I'm not hungry, I recognize that, I just can't stop. I keep like, I overeat at lunch, I'm not hungry, but then I keep reaching for dessert. I keep reaching for something sweet. So there's already a fair amount of awareness around this habit and this pattern. And it starts with, am I hungry? Like even if you're still eating, am I still hungry? We want to be just kind of creating a little subtle cue there. Yeah.
So binge eating can almost be related to taking alcohol to make you feel better because
Mhm.
you reach to something and go, oh, this when I eat this, I feel good. So I'm just gonna
Yes.
keep eating, and then they don't realize, oh, they've entered into binge eating just to make
Right.
themselves feel better.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's a coping mechanism. And so, one of the big things that I like to differentiate between we can be emotionally drinking alcohol,
Mhm.
which is different than an addiction. And so, I do not specialize in alcohol addiction. I specialize in when we are reaching for it for an emotional comfort, and often that precedes any type of addiction. My personal view on food is we're not addicted to food. We are. uh, uh, I don't know. I don't love the word addicted, but it's like we like how we feel. We are addicted to the dopamine hit, but it's hard because we need food to survive. So we
Yes.
can't it's hard. It's like, well, if I'm addicted to this, but I need it to survive too, it creates this tug of war within
Yeah.
us around good food, bad food, and other things. So yeah, it's all about just recognizing why am I eating for it? So that's a big piece of work that I do with people is I it, it's not so much about what you're eating, it's why are you reaching for it? Because that is really what's at play when we're reaching for food and we're not really hungry. It is just that self-soothing mechanism.
I mean, that's the big question right there is why? Because
Yeah,
when people walk into their kitchen and they open the refrigerator, they don't realize it's almost a gut instinct to open the refrigerator, grab something, take it, and eat it. And then
right.
halfway through whatever they're eating, they don't realize they're eating it because of a instinct or a reaction
Mhm.
to something that's
Mhm.
happened to them.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's a habit. And this is the beautiful part. It's a habit that you learned, which means
Hmm.
it's a habit you can unlearn. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And I like to encourage people with it of like, this is just a habit you learned. It's like a habit of waking up and brushing your teeth in the morning, right? We just get into
Hmm.
to a certain habit, a certain groove. And certain habits are going to serve us really well, but we also need to recognize sometimes we adopt habits that don't serve us. And sometimes they served us at a time when we needed it, when maybe it did prevent you from doing something else or kind of like getting into more trouble. And so in the moment, it served you to meet your needs. Now we can start to recognize and see, okay, ultimately this isn't helping me in my long-term goals and where I want to go with my health. So now here's how I want to address it. Because you can unlearn habits and you can teach your brain new habits, but we have to understand that psychological component.
Now, I want to talk about something very important, and that is how do you deal with someone who's just come out of a toxic relationship, who's reaching to food to make them feel good? How do you stop them
Hmm.
and think, stop? What you're doing is like going for a drug to make you feel better, but you
Yeah.
don't need that. How do you convince someone who's been through the trauma of a toxic relationship to
Yeah.
not reach for something that makes them feel good?
Right, right. And this is really great to notice and to point out because in toxic relationships, we get a dopamine hit. So, with the love bombing, with the intensity, with the high of like somebody's attention and their love and their praise or maybe gifts, there's a huge dopamine hit when we interact in those types of cycles and when we get used to them. And so when we're no longer in that dynamic, it makes a lot of sense that we're now looking for something else to give us that dopamine hit. So
Mm.
that's where a lot of people will jump back into a new relationship. They open a dating app, they go back to what has worked before because that's what their brain is after. So I want to normalize it first for people of like, this is very normal. You're taking away one hit of dopamine. So of course your brain is going to seek out another. Now that we know that, now we can start to understand why. So this is where when you're especially out of a toxic relationship, we want to understand what were the emotional needs that this person was meeting for you. And then we deassociate those emotions from a person. So when I did this work and I was looking at some of the past dating relationships that I'd been in that were not healthy and very dysfunctional, I started to recognize that I felt loved, I felt special, I felt chosen, I felt wanted and desired. I felt like certain emotions and those were the key common threads between different people that I had dated. And as I started to recognize that, now my job becomes I get to work on feeling loved and special for who I am. So part of it is allowing myself to feel rejected, to feel unwanted, to feel the pain of a breakup. Part of it is that recognizing maybe what other wounds it might be triggering. So for me, it was like core abandonment wounds. From my childhood, I grew up without my biological dad, and I had a story running of he wants nothing to do with me. So there's anytime there's rejection, any type of like fear of somebody leaving triggers that abandonment. So that's the other piece that we want to understand, are what are these deeper cycles that are happening, and really learning to soothe that. So it's learning to meet your own needs, especially the emotional ones. And then from the in the moment standpoint, it's okay, food can give us a dopamine hit, yes, but what else do you enjoy? Because so often we're looking to relax, unwind, feel good. So it's like, do you like to paint? Do you like to dance or sing? Do you like to listen to music? Do you like to cook? Do you like to maybe garden, right? What are some of the other things that you do, other hobbies, other activities that are also enjoyable? For I've got some clients, especially like my female clients, for example, they like to paint their nails or do a facial or take a bath. It's like, what are the things that are helpful? And for some, like, or for me even, it's like walking my dogs or taking my son to the park or going out to play. In the winter, certain things might be a little bit different than when it's summer, based on the season of like what we're going to do. But it's finding other ways that we can enjoy life, enjoy our time, to where it's not just food that's creating that. But it's really understanding those emotional drivers underneath.
Now, why do people binge or emotionally after something traumatic happens to them? What is that trigger?
So I think it's a way to escape, right? A lot of times we're escaping the pain. We are escaping a memory. We're escaping, often when we're in a traumatic relationship or there's been some form of trauma, we feel very helpless, very powerless. We can feel very frustrated, um, very misunderstood. And it's really, it's those emotions that we are trying to overcome. And so food now becomes a way to escape that. Not only is it a way to feel good, but it's a way to escape. It's a way to numb out. And so binge eating often happens as a way to truly numb the pain, especially for any type of physical or sexual trauma that's happened. It's a very much like, I want to numb, I don't want to feel. I don't want to feel any of this. And that's part of where the binge eating and weight gain can be a protective mechanism if there has been physical or sexual abuse in the past. It's a safety mechanism in their brain of like, well, if I'm overweight, if I'm not as attractive, if I'm seen in this way, then I will be less likely to be a victim again. It's your brain trying to keep you safe, trying to protect you in its own way, even though it might not be accurate, but it's trying to protect that from happening. So it doesn't want you to feel helpless or powerless or not in control. So it's going to try to control and feel it with the food.
Now we know that binge eating and emotional eating and even overeating can lead to weight loss. What can people do to reverse the damage from the binge eating to get their bodies back in shape?
Yes. So this is where we want to break it down and make it really simple. We're going to eat when we're hungry and stop when we're satisfied. Like those
Okay.
are the key things around the food. From there, we're also going to, what I tell clients is, no food is ever bad or off limits. We've got to end the war with food. We've got to stop making food bad, because when we decrease the restriction, when food is no longer off limits, binging decreases. And it sounds counterintuitive, because a lot of times people are like, well, I'm not going to be able to control myself. I'm just going to eat an entire pan of brownies unless I tell myself something horrible about it. But they're already eating an entire pan of
Yeah.
brownies. So it's like, no, 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 let's have one brownie or maybe two brownies, and let's allow it every single day. And so here's my approach is, you don't have to binge on the brownies when you know you can have a brownie today and tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. It creates safety and security around the food. So it's like, oh, okay, like I do get more tomorrow. So it's okay that I have that desire. I can say no to that desire in the moment because it's not going away. It's not being taken away. Sometimes food scarcity plays a role in this. If you grew up and there wasn't a lot of food in the house, maybe you had a parent that didn't cook, maybe you grew up with a single parent, or something where maybe there wasn't a lot of money. You might have a lot of like trauma around money and food in that regard. And so it's something where we really have to create safety around the food. And then it's things like, sleeping 7 to 9 hours, drinking water, drink at least 65 ounces of water. And then we're, looking at addressing stress factors. And then movement. So movement or exercise that you like, that you enjoy, and not over relying on it. So 75% of the way that we look, of our body composition, stems from what we eat and drink. So the bulk of it, right? The bulk of how we look stems from what we eat, not what we do in the gym. So while exercise is great and movement is great for our bodies and for our physical and emotional and mental health, it's also not the fastest, quickest way to exercise, because let's say it takes you, an hour to burn 400 calories, roughly, right? I don't track calories. I don't have clients do that, but you can eat 400 calories in probably 5 minutes, right? Like what takes you an hour to try to exercise and burn you can eat in about 5 minutes. So we want to be really aware that we're not over relying and overcompensating with exercise, but it's really just looking at the lifestyle. And then a big piece for the emotional eating, binge eating aspect is going to be like addressing the trauma and healing it. And then two is going to be creating a life that you love, a life that's full of joy and adventure and spontaneity and fun and pleasure, so that you're not searching for it in food, right? It becomes a lot easier to say no to food when food is no longer that primary source of joy and pleasure and relaxation. When joy is the main thing that you're looking forward to every day, or when food is the main thing you're looking forward to, it's going to be really hard to say no to it. It's going to be really hard to stop, because that's your feel good. So we have to create a life now that feels good. So we have to look at your job and your career and like, are you doing what you love? Do you have a hobby that you really love and enjoy? How is your relationship? How's your marriage? How's the relationship with your kids or your parents or siblings or friendships, right? We need to be looking at these other factors. Are you living in a state, in a climate that you like? We've got to address these other aspects.
You're so right. People need to look at not just internally when it's in their house or even their bodies, but externally, everything else around them that affects them.
Yeah.
And when you
Yes.
have outside things affect you and you have no control over it, you reach for something to make you feel better.
Yeah. Right. Right. Because at least I can have control over this.
Yeah.
At least I can get something that I want. I may not get what I want in a job. I may not get what I want with my, a boyfriend or girlfriend, but at least I can get what I want when it comes to food. And so
I
it
mean,
becomes that little indulgence.
one of the things my mother always used to tell me, and she still tells me, is whenever I go to eat like a bag of chips or something, she's like, don't eat from the bag,
Yes.
because grab
Hmm.
a handful, put it in a cup, because this way you're not, when you, and now I'm realizing it, what you're saying is when you eat from a bag, you're binge eating. You're
Hmm.
just sitting there eating and you're not registering it. You're just eating to
Hmm.
eat.
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
minute you have to measure out how much you're taking and putting in the cup, you're being more conscious of what you're eating and
Yes.
you're watching it.
Yes, yes, 100%. So I think we tend to have a lot of food rules around like what foods we can and can't eat, when really a better food rule is what you just said. It's no longer eating out of the bag, it's putting it in a bowl, putting it on a plate. It's no longer eating standing in front of the refrigerator or in front of the pantry. It's like taking it and sitting down. It's eating something with a spoon or a fork. It's, like really enjoying it, taking your time with it. It's finding little things like that like those little habits that we, just kind of pick up over time, or we just, kind of have that habit. Again, it's habit you learned. It's a habit you can unlearn and retrain. Yeah.
Now, what are some of the signs if somebody realizes they're binging but don't realize it? What are some of the signs they can look for themselves?
Yeah. So, and this is kind of a tough subject too for some people, because they'll notice binge eating and maybe family members or friends, and they want to bring up the topic, but it might also feel a little nervous about it. They don't want to be shameful and judgmental, things like that. And so, the biggest piece to start to notice is listening to your body for what are your true hunger signals. How do you know when your body is hungry? How do you know when you've had enough and that you are like at the point of satisfied versus overeating? From there, once you realize I'm overeating, now we want to start to get curious and start to understand why. So then it's, what emotionally am I feeling that I'm trying to avoid?
Mhm.
Or what emotion am I trying to create? Like, what positive emotion do I want to feel instead? And sometimes it's a negative emotion and I just want to numb it out. It might not even be that we want something positive. It might just be, I just don't want to feel that. So we need to understand what that is, whether it's fear, anxiety, depression, rejection, embarrassment. And then we want to create the goal. And what I really help clients do is to feel safe in their bodies with any emotion. Emotions are just vibrations in our body. That's it. They can't hurt us. They can't do anything. And most of the time, if we are not fighting and resisting, they last 2 to 3 minutes. They're not super long. Sometimes you might
I've heard
like
that.
let's say you lose a loved one and there's grief and sadness. There are going to be times when things might last a little bit longer, but typically there's waves where it'll come in and the intense part is 2 to 3 minutes long and that's it. And when you give yourself permission to feel it, when you give yourself permission to cry, to move through it, it passes faster. And so
Mhm.
that is a big piece, is starting to understand like what is the emotion. So let's say stress. It's like, okay, I notice I'm feeling stressed. Where am I feeling it in my body? So, where in my body is it? What does it feel like? For me, it often feels like tightness in my chest. If I feel anxious, it feels like heavy weights churning in my stomach, like rocks in a dryer. It's like, think about what does it remind you of? And we just want to just sit with it and notice, like, okay, I'm safe. Sometimes I'll put my hand on my heart. I'll tell myself, I am safe. I notice I'm feeling this emotion, and I'll name it. Can I just sit here and be with it? And I notice I want to reach for food. I notice I want to eat to self-soothe. I notice I don't want to feel this right now. And instead, I'm going to pause and I'm going to allow myself to feel it. And if I want to keep eating afterwards, I can. And the more that you do this, the more that there's permission, the more that you start to recognize, the more you're going to say, I don't need to eat. And it's a progression. It's not going to be like a light switch turning on. We don't just flip it and all of a sudden we're magically healed. Like I wish it was that simple. I really
Yeah.
like if I could do that for people, that would be amazing. But we have to learn and create the safety in our bodies to feel the emotions that we are trying to eat over.
I think that's one of the most important things is people want to feel safe. It's just they don't know how to reach that point when they've been through so much trauma in their life.
Right. Right. Yep. 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 And that's what we do like on calls specifically. So I have training and resources that people can watch outside of our call times. And then the goal of coaching calls for me and for my clients is implementation of like, let's practice, let's work on this, let's go through it. And I teach them how to create safety in their body, how to create safety in their environment, how to recognize like who, maybe even who are some of the people that they need to limit access and limit contact with because there's such a trigger. And sometimes, we can't always change every circumstance, but we do want to look at what circumstance can we change? Are there some that we can change to create a better and more peaceful environment for us to live and to thrive?
Now, have you seen a lot of autistic clients come to you and say, or just those who are neurodivergent that say, I'm having problems. I know I have issues binge eating because I'm reaching for bags of chips. How do you deal
Mhm.
with
Yeah, and I would say most of the clients who are more neurodivergent, they have ADHD, and they're wrestling with that, and it's often there's awareness of what's happening, and there's this awareness of, okay, I notice this is going on, but I don't have the power to stop it. It's like I can't stop it, and so it's taking them through the exact same process and recognizing that their brains are going to want to jump into different directions. They might have a harder time like sitting, being calm, tuning in. And so every client is going to be starting at a different point. So what one client might start with like 3 to 5 minutes of like meditation or like breathing exercises. Somebody else, it might be 30 seconds, it might be 1 minute. And so it's understanding kind of what that baseline looks like, and then we incrementally increase it over time. So it's going to be a lot of the same process. It just might be in a different order, or like a progression that fits their needs and the way that their brains work, the way that they can understand it, the way that they can feel safe and feel okay in that space. And then a lot of it is also identifying the trauma and any abuse that they've been through and not letting them blame their diagnosis for it. I think that is a big thing that I am really adamant about. I have several clients who they want to say, well, it's because I have ADHD. It's because I'm on the spectrum. It's because of these things. And really, it's like we then are excusing and justifying
Mhm.
really bad behavior, abusive words. And that is one of the big things that I will help them do of like, no, 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 we're not doing that. You are not like, we're not blaming you for their thing. This was like, that was them, their actions, their emotions, their words. Are not responsible for that. Your diagnosis is not responsible for that. And then that is one of the things that I really want listeners to hear and to know of like, you are not the problem. You are not bad. You are not wrong. You just like your brain works a little bit differently, and that's okay. And it's all about finding what are the tools, what are the systems and the processes that work best for you, for your brain.
And that's so important. That's actually a very important message is that it's not you. It's not your disability.
Yeah.
It's society that puts these regulations on us and saying you have to act this way. You
Mhm.
have to be this way. It's the employers, it's the
Mhm.
government, it's everything
Mhm.
else that's saying we can't give you these resources, thus putting all this pressure on top of you. Then
Mhm.
you reach for
Mhm.
something or you go through a traumatic experience because of it. And then
Mhm.
you're getting all this negativity hitting you, thinking it's
Yeah.
me, it's me, it's me, and you want to feel good. And then you reach
Mhm.
for something
Yeah.
that gives you that dopamine rush, and then
Right.
one thing leads to another, you're binge eating or
Yeah.
emotional eating.
Yeah. Right. Right. So while I help clients to allow the emotions and to sit with all of the
Mhm.
negative emotions, the other piece too is we don't want to stay there. So maybe you're experiencing shame, for example, and you feel really ashamed of something that happened or something you did. Allow yourself to feel it. And then we're going to rewrite the story. And then we're going to get to a place of neutral, a place of peace, acceptance, compassion, gratitude. We don't have to love what happened or love what's happening in your life, but we need to get out of being in this pit and this mire of negativity and at least move into something neutral and change that story. And that's a big way that we don't need the food moving forward because we are telling ourselves a new story. We feel more empowered. We feel more confident. We learn to trust like trusting your own intuition, learning to trust yourself, trust your judgment, because we're always learning from it. Everybody's going to make mistakes. The real question is, are you going to learn from your mistakes or are you just going to feel bad and beat yourself up and keep making them over and over again? That's what we want to avoid.
That's one of the biggest things I've been a proponent of with my friends and everybody else who are going through a hard time and they just keep blaming themselves and
Mhm.
they will keep wanting to change themselves for others and this and that. And I'm like, and I keep saying, listen, the first step is you gotta love yourself, you gotta trust yourself.
Right.
You can't
Right.
let people dictate what you do, how you do it, and everything else.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you you're not you anymore.
Mhm.
And you're
Mhm.
gonna make yourself sick. I had a friend who just he was going through a hard time and he was really depressed. And I'm like, listen, you gotta love yourself first before you love anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard. It is hard sometimes because we can be so used to being our own biggest critic. And we
Yeah.
take thoughts and beliefs and things from other people and we adopt them as gospel truth. We adopt them as our own. And then we start telling ourselves those things. It's like they get stuck on this loop on repeat. And we've got it like that is one of the cycles that we break. We've got to break that self talk cycle, the negative ones, because that is so detrimental. It's just as bad as the abuse that we face from other people, as the abuse we inflict on ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, because we are our own worst critics.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of people wind up with anorexia is they
Mm.
look in the mirror, they don't see perfection. They see all these flaws and they want to be
Right.
perfect.
Right.
And one thing leads to another, and then they start starving themselves to the point where their
Right.
mind doesn't register, hey, you are perfect in your own eyes.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
world that's putting all these things on you that are making you feel this way.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's tough because there are ideal standards for women and for men.
Mm.
There's ideal standards we see with models, with movies, actors, even musicians as to what the right body type looks like. I'd say for women, sometimes it's like it's a curvy figure. It's like you either need big boobs or a big butt, or for men, it's like you need to be muscular, right? You don't want to be skinny, but you're supposed to look a certain way, and it's like more masculine to look this than that, just like it's more feminine to look this than that. And it can be really hard because we all look different. And there's probably going to be 2% of the population that ever fits into whatever this right or normal way is. And it's really validating your own beauty, validating your own goodness, and like like you said, like the perfection of your body and your size, shape, and weight. And I think the other aspect is you can love yourself and you can love your body and still want to lose weight. If you are overweight, if you've been overeating and binge eating, you may have be carrying some extra weight. And so this is where we also want to be really honest with ourselves, about what's happening. Like, am I really healthy? I wasn't significantly overweight, but I also, like, at a time when I was binging, but I also, like, that habit still wasn't helpful. So a lot of times it's not just about the weight, but we really want to look at those habits and the lifestyle and other health markers and health conditions, so that we can create the best life possible for us.
Now we know that binge eating leads to overweight and people gain weight. What are some of the tips you give people that say, hey, let's turn this around and let's help you lose that weight? How do you get
Hmm.
them to that point?
Yeah. So the some of what I've said was like we want to listen for real hunger. What does
Mm.
real physical hunger feel like in your body?
Well, listen
How do
to
you
your
know when? Hmm? Yeah, like how do you know when you've had enough? Like,
gut.
are you stopping at satisfied? Sleep. Sleep
Mm.
is one of your body's secret fat burning weapons. And it's one of those things that we often dismiss as like, yeah, yeah, I know. But sleep and water, those are two like of the best ways to be like for your body to stay energized, to burn fat. When you sleep, your body is regulating your hunger and satiety hormones. It's helping to improve your mood, right? So it's like it really that like the sleep aspect and getting 7 to 9 hours each night is really important for you to have to be living a healthy life and to be able to lose the weight. And then I also recommend when it comes to actual food, I tell clients more and less. So I want to eat more fruits and veggies. I want to eat more protein. I want to eat less pizza and less burgers and less protein bars. It doesn't mean I'm going to eat none. It just means I'm going to eat less. So for me, that looked like rather than eating 4 desserts per day, I just want one. Can I have one dessert per day? Instead of eating, five, four, sometimes it was 3 or 4 protein bars. It was, can I eat one? I wanted to also, because I grew up where it was like fat was bad, calories are bad, carbs are bad. You kind of have these Frankenstein diet rules. And so I decided, I was like, I want to start eating more rice and more carbs and more bread and more pasta and in a smaller amount, but just to prove to myself of like I can eat carbs and not gain weight and not balloon up. So for some people, they're like me and we need to introduce some carbohydrates into their diet. For some, we need to incorporate and add more vegetables and try to get one vegetable at each meal. For others, it's protein, and it's learning to how can I incorporate protein into each of my meals so that I feel satiated longer. So everybody's going to look a little bit different, but those are often like the key starting points of like, right. And it's like, it's what we know, right? It's the fruits and veggies, it's the protein, it's being mindful of the snacking, it's really healing the emotional eating and binge eating habit. And so a lot of the work that I do with clients is around self-sabotage because we
Mm.
can know what to do, but we don't always do it. So then we want to understand what are the excuses and justifications that have me not following the plan, that have me overeating and binging. Like that's where it's at. But just working on the binge eating aspect, even if you changed nothing else about what you were eating, yep, guarantee you'd be losing weight.
Now, are there any diets you recommend your clients go on, like to help them lose weight, or do you just tell them less, not more?
Yeah, so there's no specific diet. I have them listen to their bodies and really think about that less and more. And I tell them like oftentimes we want less processed, more real food, but there are going to be times when like you want a pizza. There are times when you want bread, like and it's
Yeah.
okay. We want to be mindful of like, okay, what am I currently consuming? What does a little bit less look like? What does a little bit more of these healthier options look like? And then for certain health conditions, like if somebody has an autoimmune disease,
Mhm.
Hashimoto's, for example, then I may recommend a specific protocol for what they should be eating more of, less of, more specifically. So if somebody is pre-diabetic, if they have maybe high cholesterol, if there's an autoimmune, if there's anything like that, then there are more specific things because of that health condition. So it's still kind of dependent on the person, but that would be the only time I would recommend a specific diet.
I mean, what people don't realize is that emotions play big into your binge eating because of the
Right,
trauma.
right.
What are some of those emotions, though? If someone is binge eating, they can look back into themselves and realize, oh, this emotion is making me feel this, therefore I'm reaching for that.
Yeah, yeah, great one. So loneliness can be a big one. Feeling
Mm,
alone, feeling lonely, feeling rejected,
hmm
feeling embarrassed, because a lot of times when we're embarrassed or humiliated, we feel like we're not part of the group. We feel like ostracized, like we're an outsider, we don't belong. So that's a big one. Shame and guilt are big ones. And so guilt is I did a bad thing. Shame is I am a bad person, like I
Mm,
am bad. And so sometimes they go hand in hand, but those two there is a difference. And so those are some key ones that people are eating over. And so if there's been trauma, a lot of times there's a whole like chemical cocktail of negative emotions that we're feeling. So a lot of times there is guilt, there is shame of like somehow I caused this, somehow I'm the problem. There can be like humiliation and embarrassment of like I can't believe this happened, or I can't believe like there might be feelings of like I let this happen, or I allowed this to go on for so long, or why didn't I say something? um we can feel rejected, and that can be part of it of like I've whether it's what people are saying, what they're doing, it's like I'm not part of the group, I'm not allowed, I don't belong. And which can also trigger the loneliness. And so those I would say are often some very common ones. Um, and it's really learning to, yeah, just get curious. I would say that's the biggest piece is like, can we get curious? Kind of like we're a detective, right? Like no shame, no judgment, but just curious about what is it that I'm feeling. And there are different feeling wheels online. And I love these because they start with like, 4 or 6 kind of core common emotions. And then it kind of spreads out from there to help start to gain even just the vocabulary for like, what am I feeling? Most of the time, anger is
mhm,
going to be covering up other emotions underneath. So it's good to also recognize, like, okay, I'm feeling really angry. Why am I feeling angry? What's underneath the anger? And we
mhm.
can go a little bit deeper to really explore what that is. And it's tough when you grow up in a toxic environment, in a toxic household. Negative emotions especially, they're not allowed. Like certain emotions are not allowed. You're not allowed to feel this way. And so you learn to try to be good, to try to fit in. You learn to dumb this down, to numb it out. And so it's really now as adults, often we're doing this work of trying to figure out how can I allow my own emotions. And then for me, it's been I'm going to learn how to allow my own emotions so I can allow my son to feel his emotions too. So he can feel his at 4 years old while there's still some boundaries around what that looks like. But I'm never going to shame him or tell him he's bad or like the quit your whining, suck it up. If you're going to cry, you're going to go to your room, right? We learn often at a very young age, like we can't do that, or now we're unloved, we're not a part of the group or part of the family. We're punished in some way for these emotions. And as kids, like we don't know to regulate our emotions, but neither did our parents. So they didn't know any better. So that this is where it's like we get to break the cycles. We get to choose to do things differently. I'm going to do the work for me, and I'm also doing the work in part for my son.
What's important is people don't realize that rejection leads to so many emotions. It's not just stress, it's not just embarrassment,
Yeah.
it's feeling left out. It's why I was feeling left out. It's
Yes.
why I was rejected. It's is it me? People
Yeah.
don't bother to look at the outside and say, what if it's not me, then why are they rejecting me? What is
Right.
it they see? Because
Right.
it's the other way around. It's maybe they see something that they don't like, but you're always thinking it's you, it's you, it's you. Maybe it's the
Yeah.
other person who just has the problem with you or with
Right.
themselves in projecting it.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. And this happens, I mean, this happens for so many people. I know I felt really rejected after a breakup a couple years ago, and it wasn't me. I did nothing wrong. He now had, like, we've had a conversation since then where he was like, "Oh yeah, no, it was not you. It was all me." And we don't always have those types of experiences where we can go back and talk to people, but at the time, he broke up with me and I felt completely rejected, completely blindsided, like, what the heck? It was like I tried to have a conversation and all of a sudden he just like ran and was like out the door, and really it was him. It was his trauma, it was his avoidance, it was his own challenges with intimacy and communication. And but I internalized a lot of that in the beginning. And not that I needed to blame somebody else or to blame him, but I also got to the point where I was like, it wasn't me. I did nothing wrong here. And that's okay. And so I think that's a big piece, like you said, with the rejection of recognizing so often it's not you, it's the other person. And we don't always understand that or know how to make sense of it. And so we assume that it must be me. It must be something I did or I said or something's bad or wrong about me, especially if you have a diagnosis. I think that's the other thing
Yeah.
where we're often very quick to go to that.
I mean, people don't what we don't hear a lot of is it's me, it's not you, it's me. You don't hear
Mhm.
that much in when people are breaking up in relationships because
Mhm.
people they rather project how they're feeling onto somebody else. Take
Right.
the blame
Right.
away from them and
Yeah.
then but they don't realize the damage they're doing.
Right. Right. Yeah, they don't. And I think with our culture and our society, we are starting to wake up more to what is happening mentally, emotionally, psychologically. But the most of the time we don't realize, we don't understand kind of how our words impact others, how our actions impact others. So I think we're making really great progress. But you're right, we still have a long way to go. And that's where I think about it as like, okay, what can I do? What's my part? How can I make this world better? And also know, like, I want to pass on good habits and good things to my son. And my hope and goal would be that he passes things on to his, if he has kids, his future kids, and the future people that he's in relationship with. hmm
Now, what advice do you have for those who are realizing they are binge eating and would like to get out of it?
Yeah. So this is where I recommend finding support. So it is really hard to truly identify and solve your binge eating on your own. And so this is where finding a therapist, a coach, some nutritionists specialize in this, but a lot of times like therapists and coaches are going to be really great. So you are like if anybody's interested in learning more about me and what I do, uh, I've got a podcast called Hungry for Love that talks about a lot of these concepts and how to break through it, how to get the help and support that they need. I work with clients one on one in private coaching, and then I also am starting a membership. So there'll be a couple different ways. But I would look out and get support. So even if it's not me, but you've decided, I know I need to find somebody, I would start looking for a coach, a community, a group, something where you can get plugged in and get help and support and the resources that you need in order to solve this. Because usually it's like we're in it, we can't see it. We need somebody on the outside to be able to help us navigate this, who's been through it, who has solved it, and who has that compassion and understanding, but can help you as you are going through it and bring the awareness. Because it's that whole like you don't know what you don't know. If you knew how to solve it, we would have solved it by now. But there's a lot of nuance to it. So that's my biggest suggestion is like find support, get support with this, whether it is one-on-one, a small group, a membership, or even start like reading books, listening to podcasts, like get some help and find somebody who resonates with you. Again, like I'm not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody is going to like me, but there are other people out there who do this type of work who can really help to help you really create the most successful life.
Now, how do people get a hold of you if they want to get talk to you? How do they find you on the web?
Yeah. So on the website, it's bodyyoucrave.com. So they can visit me over on the website. I'm also on Instagram at Jillian Amadea. And again, the podcast is Hungry for Love. And there are links on all of those sites. If you want to schedule a free consultation, if you want to book a call, there are links for free workshops and webinars. So there are plenty of ways to get connected with me there.
And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Reed Miles. That was Jillian Scott, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you.